has been a while. The city is on fire, quite literally. So I just wanted to take a pause and kind of reflect and just take in the moment. It is quite impactful. I mean, it's like nothing I've ever seen before. But anyhow, for this video, I want us to focus on this one thing, right? Which is reality is essentially a reflection of your inner world. What you see happening in your life, your perception of what's happening, of your reality, is indicative of your psyche, of the inner monologue that you're having with yourself. So, one time I was scrolling through Twitter, and the first thing that kind of struck me was, and I'm seeing all these ideas and I'm seeing these things, and a lot of it was very negative, very black pilled. And I was like, dude, I don't even subscribe to this. Like, none of this stuff do I vibe with. That is not how I feel about what's happening around me. And so it started making me wonder, like, how much of the information that we're getting fed is something that we try to digest, indigest, have trouble with. And unfortunately, a lot of people just take it in and assume that it is truth, right? Assume that that is a worldview that they want to take on for themselves. You know, the dude, for example, who's a diabetic, who hates his wife, who can't stand a 60-hour or 60-mile rather commute, right? 5 hours total ride to and fro on a daily basis. I mean, a guy like that, who was essentially living paycheck to paycheck, doesn't have the energy to change his circumstances, right? His inner world, the reflection of what is inside of him and ultimately what he puts out into the world, he can't change it. Not because he can't, but he doesn't have the energy to. And if there's one thing that I've realized over time is that everything can be solved. Everything is an energy problem. Everything can be solved with energy. And I used to think, if I just wake up, I would just have energy, right? Or I would have days where I'm like, everything just kind of went in sync. Everything was so easy, so seamless. I would just kind of go through the day and I felt like I was in a movie. And I would try to capture those days and try to figure out what it was that I did different. And there wasn't really anything, right? I could never quite figure out what it was. But one thing I did realize, fine, I can't always get that lucky. But what I could do is, I used to think that energy was something that you would just be given, right? And instead, what you need to do is, if you're feeling off, if you're feeling lazy, if you're in a stupor, what you have to do essentially is you have to create energy, right? The funny thing is that if the moment that you start to move, you start to get a little momentum, that starts to create a little bit of heat, combustion, and that's how you generate energy, right? So it's like you get energy by generating energy. And I think it's something that people overlook, right? Which is energy, the energy to think, to imagine, to feel, to do. You can't get there if your tank is empty. All right. So sometimes you need to exercise yourself out of exhaustion, out of pain, out of suffering, out of fatigue. All right. I talk to a lot of older gentlemen, and one thing you end up realizing is they're disgusted with their reality, with what they've made with their life or lack thereof. And they can't get out of it because unfortunately there's just not enough energy left, right? They're waiting to die. It's a tragedy, right? It's funny, but it's a tragedy because it's like, man, if there's anything that a young person can take from that is that shit, like if I don't do the right things, if I don't make the right decisions, if I don't use my energy efficiently and really value that, I could be headed down this path, right? Where I get terminally ill. I choose the wrong partner. I marry the wrong person, right? I get the wrong wife. I have kids that suck or they hate me. I have a job that I can't stand. These are unfortunately all very existential threats that if you don't take serious, you could end up like a guy like that. I remember a long time ago, I worked as like a TA at a school, and I took to one of the teachers, and he was a cool guy. And I remember him telling me, he's like, dude, like, I'm miserable. I kind of hate my life. And I was just like, whoa, taken aback. I mean, this guy lives in the hills. I hope his house is still there. Guy lives in the hills. And he has a wife and a child and, a daughter. and he just hates his life, and he's hitting the vape pen talking about how much he hates life and how he wishes he had a better job or do something different. But the reality is the pressures of American life, right? Having to pay for a mortgage doesn't give you the license, the luxury of being able to just leave a job, willy nilly, and then decide to do something else on the fly. I mean, you can do that. You can. Absolutely. You can burn the floor under you. But the consequences are much more deeper because now you're taking care of two other people. And so there's a pressure there that comes with that doesn't make it so easy for people to get away from. So if anything, what I'm telling you is to make the right decisions so that you don't end up in a situation like that. So you're not hitting a vape pen in the hills, you know, in between your insulin spikes, and then you have to go and into a dialysis center in the future. I mean, these are all things that we can modify and change. But ultimately, what you end up seeing in reality, your reality is really just a reflection of your inner world. And I used to kind of fall into the trap that I could try to be something I wasn't. And the reality was I'm just a jolly guy. I'm a happy guy. So it's like, why am I going to try to adopt a persona or mentality that doesn't really suit me? That's not in my nature. And so I think the first thing you should do is just kind of make sure that you separate yourself from social media, from the stuff that people say on there, because ultimately that is a reflection of their inner world, not yours. You can look at it, you can dabble with it, play with it, let the ideas entertain you, let them stimulate you. But if it's not something you subscribe to, then naturally you should be able to discard it rather easily. So anyhow, it's just something to think about. You know, really reflect on what it is that you're focusing on, that you're putting your ideas into, because ultimately that's what's going to be your reality, right? So if I have a positive outlook, if I think that I'm destined to win, if I think that the world is working in my favor, I can smile with gusto, right? With ease. If I feel like the world is my oyster, if I can laugh, if I can go about carelessly, aimlessly through the world, I think I'll have a better chance of making things happen than if I'm sitting here pondering and thinking of all the things I'm supposed to do and then never do anything, right? Because I'm tepid, I'm half stepping, things of that nature. If you're too much in your head, I think that ends up being counterproductive. I have a buddy who's an extremely, he's very intelligent. But what that ends up doing is causing a lot of heartache, right? Because you're always doubting every move you make, every step you take, any interaction you have, because you're always in your mind thinking about your mind's eye, right? Thinking about, well, what is it that I'm doing? Are they thinking something bad about me? And you don't want to fall into that trap, because then it's an exercise in futility. It's exhausting, and you don't really get any answers. There's nothing definitive about the perception of you from the outside. So just keep that in mind, all right? If you feel like you're always in your head, get out of there for a little bit, live a little. I think life is definitely meant to be lived outside. The irony of making a video inside, right? But nevertheless, I spend a ton of time, as much as I can, outdoors, doing my exercise, walking around as much as I can, indulging in, whatever I can, as best I can with what I have, and do the same. And you'll realize how much of your imagination you can make real by just stepping outside and being motivated by the things you see. But anyhow, I hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next one.